Shabbat Shalom. Az yashir Yisrael et hashira hazot Ali ve'er enula. Then Israel sang this song. Spring up, O well, sing to it. The well which the chieftains dug, which the nobles of the people started with maces, with their own staffs. The language is a little oblique, but the joy and the commitment and the delight in finally finding some water shines through this little section that concluded our Torah reading today and just sends a ripple of goosebumps through any who hear these words. The Reform commentary points out that in later centuries, this so-called song at the well was sung in the Temple of Jerusalem every third Shabbat at the afternoon service. And the Song of the Sea was sung on the intervening 2 Shabbats. As a bit of a liturgy wonk, I love that note because it reminds me and all of us that you don't have to do the same thing every week. That shaking it up a little bit, alternating between texts, melodies, media, is okay, and was even done in the ancient temple. This little piece of song is one of the very few pieces we have like it in all of the Torah. The Israelites don't sing all that often, but when they do, we should take note. We just heard an extraordinary haftarah. Much to be said about it, and we did a deep dive at our Torah study a couple of days ago into it. It is related to the second Torah portion for this day when they're read together, to the portion of Balak, because it makes specific mention of Balak, king of Moab, and Balaam, the non-Israelite prophet that he hires to go curse the Israelites. Of course, in an almost comic moment and interlude in the book of Numbers, Balak and Balaam end up hopping mad, Balak especially, Rumpelstiltskin-like, because all Balaam can do is bless the Israelites. And one of the most famous pieces of blessing that he gives them is Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov, mishkenotecha Yisrael. How good are your tents, O Jacob, your dwellings, O Israel. And in the Haftarah, we have a couple of poignant, loud instances of the people saying, Ma, what or how should we make good to God? Should we bring yearling calves, our first offerings? Maybe we should bring thousands of rams and rivers of oil, even our firstborn. No, no, says Micah on behalf of God. You know, Matov, you know what is good. To love justice and mercy and walk humbly with your God. Walk humbly. Well, what does that mean? The question was asked in Torah study the other day, and I've been thinking a lot about it ever since. Moses was said to be the humblest person who ever lived. But I think there are some additional clues in this Torah portion and in our Haftarah that give us a little bit of a different angle on just who it was that exemplifies modesty or humility in Jewish tradition. We get a clue in the Haftarah when Micah says, chapter 5, 6, verse 4, I brought you up from the land of Egypt, redeemed you from the house of bondage, and sent Moses, Aaron, and Miriam to lead you. It's a singularity. Micah is the only prophet, nay, the only voice, that groups together Moses, Aaron, and their older sister, Miriam, as leaders of the Jewish people. Miriam, who makes just a few appearances in all of Torah, but what an indelible mark she leaves. I love when we are in the first triennial, but I read it every year nonetheless. At the beginning of Parshat Chukat, after the ritual of the red heifer, Miriam dies, and the people are without water. There's no mourning for Miriam that we know of. We are forced to read between the lines to see what her passing does to the people of Israel and to her brother. But humility in Jewish tradition, and particularly in the Musar tradition, is all about taking up the right amount of space. And to look at Miriam's life with the few mentions and appearances that she makes in the Torah is, if you will allow me to say, a master class in taking up the right amount of space. As a very little girl, she protects her brother, and at that point she's not even named in early Exodus. But the rabbis imagine a dialogue behind the scenes where her father, Amram, is refraining from creating any more children with his wife Yocheved because they will be born, of course, into slavery. And it is Miriam, the rabbis say, who steps forward and says, Pharaoh's decree is evil and has a chance of not coming true. But you, Father, you are righteous, and so your decree will come true. How can you say you will not have any more children? We have to have hope that a Redeemer is coming. From the earliest age, the rabbis imagine Miriam literally stepping up to the plate. And you don't even have to read the Midrash, the rabbinic legends, to see that in Exodus, when she stands in the reeds and watches out for her brother, sees that he is plucked from the water by Pharaoh's daughter, and she again steps up to the plate, daring to speak to a queen, saying, "This child is Israelite. Shall I bring an Israelite woman to nurse him?" In so many ways, Miriam begins her life as a savior, and she continues. When we meet her again at the Sea of Reeds, she has thought ahead enough, with enough faith and fortitude and belief in miracles and in Moses and in God to say, "Women, bring your tambourines. We may yet have reason to sing." And so she does. Miriam the prophetess in Exodus, after Moses has sung his magnificent song, Az Yashir Moshe, then Moses sang, she brings the women forward, and she says in a verb that doesn't appear all that often, Vata'an lahem Miriam. And Miriam chanted or sang for them. Shiru ladonai ki ga'o ga'a, sus verochvo ramavayam. Sing to the Eternal, for he has triumphed gloriously. Horse and driver he has hurled into the sea. It's not a song of a shrinking violet. It's not delicate. It is a song of triumph in war. Miriam takes her place with the women. Yes, she comes, quote, after the men. This is a long time ago, and though we've come a long way, we still have a long way to go to achieve equality, and we'll have to be okay with that today. But Miriam comes forward. She doesn't let the men have the final word. She takes her place, and she leads the women in song and dance. And for that, and her earlier appearance in Exodus, she is immortalized. But she is human. And later in the book of Numbers, she wonders with Aaron, has God only spoken to Aaron? Has he not spoken to us as well? It's maybe a little more chutzpah than was required at that moment, and what she was actually saying about Moses' wife doesn't sound so good, but we're not exactly sure what she said. The Torah is wonderfully vague. She may have been standing up for Moses' wife. There is a thought in the Midrash that Moses had stopped having relations with his wife, stopped doing his conjugal duty, and perhaps Miriam is commenting on his neglect of his Cushite wife. Dark skin was valued in that time, so we read a lot of it through our own later lens. What Miriam was saying about Moses, the gossip wasn't good, but what she actually was saying, we will never know. Still, she and Aaron come forward. They take up maybe a little more space than they should at that moment. But if you will recall, who is it that gets publicly punished? It's Miriam. She is the one who is humbled through that experience, and she has to take her punishment rather publicly. She is given a skin condition. She is separate from the community, but they wait for her before they move on. Miriam occupies such a powerful place in Jewish literature and lore. At that moment, she has spoken, she has been seen and heard, but bears the punishment for her actions. We don't hear from her ever again until this week's Parsha. And though we don't hear from her directly, she is present in this story. First, she passes away at a place called Kadesh, already a sense of sanctification, something holy, kadosh, about the place where she dies. And Moses is, of course, in mourning, though we are not privy to the specifics, but he is in a place of emotional upheaval. He strikes the rock, he speaks harshly to the Israelites when they are complaining yet again. And of course, later in the Parsha, after Moses is already told he will not enter the promised land, Aaron dies as well. And now the people are creating a ritual. They don't mourn formally for Miriam, but perhaps they were missing something, some sense of ritual, and they mourn for Aaron for 30 days. It's from where we get the notion of Shloshim. Miriam is still with us. I would submit that in Micah's prescription to pursue justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with our God, he is saying, akin to just a few verses earlier, pursue justice as Moses did. Be one who loves mercy, as we are told Aaron did, the pursuer of peace. And walk humbly with your God is to be like Miriam. Think for a moment of the Miriams in your lives, the women who may not have the center stage all the time, but who work so hard and so often behind the scenes, often whose worth is only fully realized after they are gone. Miriam was considered to be the transmitter of the tradition to the women, and many early rabbinic tales speak of the punishment of the Israelites being only meted out to the men. That in fact it was, yes, Caleb and Joshua and their families and the little ones whom we are told would enter the promised land, but the rabbis weren't happy with that. They imagined that through the merit of the women who didn't give up hope because of Miriam's example, Miriam's faith, and there's a tradition that says that Miriam was Pua, one of the midwives, and that Yocheved, Moses' mother, was Shifra, the other midwife, and that though her name Miriam can mean bitter waters, if she was in fact Pua, and we'll never know, it's a beautiful notion, Pua comes from a root that can mean nurturing or loving. Yes, Miriam was born into slavery, into bitterness, and her life is characterized by relationships with water so much of the time. But Miriam looms so large, really reclaiming her place in our lore, in our legend, and in our love. She is a complicated, magnificent character, and she has so much still to teach us. And at the end of this parsha, when a well appears, because it is said that because the Israelites cried because they had no water, Rashi is the most famous commentary on it. He submits that there was a magical well that accompanied the Israelites in the desert because of Miriam's worth, and that when she died, the well dried up. But here, at the end of our Torah reading today, it is something indeed that the narrative has shifted a little bit. Earlier, it was Moses and Miriam singing. Now we have Az Yashir Yisrael. Then all of Israel sang this song. They have been taught well. They are now able to write their own song. They have a ways to go, but they are singing with the song of Moses and especially Miriam in their hearts. And this unusual verb that appeared at the Song of the Sea with Miriam appears again. Enu la. They sang to it. The Jewish people learned the Song of Miriam. They sang it, and we sing it still today. Shabbat shalom.